You've read all the books, you've done the therapy, you understand why you're anxious, why you have trust issues, and why you shut down in conflict. You can trace it all back to your childhood, explain it perfectly to your friends, and yet you still wake up at 3 a.m. with your heart racing. You still feel that tightness in your chest when someone raises their voice, and you still can't relax even when you're safe. That's because trauma doesn't live in your thoughts, it lives in your body, and no amount of understanding will shift what's stored in your nervous system. So we've all been sold, and for a very long time we've been sold a misconception. And we've kind of been taught that insight equals healing. So at the minute we understand what's going on, it will kind of just dissolve and go away. And there is some element to that with some things. And, talking therapy can be incredible and it can clear a lot of stuff, but it isn't everything and it's not the whole picture. And I kind of know this from experience from having lived through lots of different traumas, and how talking about it can have some support, but it doesn't necessarily deal with everything. So you can know everything about your trauma, you can understand it, you can be able to process it, but you can still be living in it or still be living with it without even realizing that that's what's going on. So trauma can live very much in the body. So you can believe you've overcome something, that it wasn't a big issue, and then being triggered by an environment or certain words, and it can come back and you can feel it again. And I've had this happen to me several times. One particularly was about stuff around my dad and me destroying all of his letters and everything when I was 16. Didn't think about it, didn't think it was an issue. And then something triggered it when I was a lot older. So I was obviously still carrying that trauma within my body, because the trauma wasn't in my mind, I was holding it. It was in my body, so things can happen and that can come back up. And I definitely very much, and this is what happens, is you will then feel that trauma before you can think about it. So you feel it happening and you feel all the emotions, but you're not thinking trauma. You're not necessarily thinking about the event, but you're feeling it. And when you kind of go back and you think about the times where the trauma's been intense, it's all been about the feelings, the emotions, the sensations, what's happening in the body, not the thoughts that are happening in the brain, even though they are linked. But it's very much what's been happening in the body. And when we kind of get that idea, then it kind of shifts a lot of bit. And I've done a lot of TRE in my life. That's just trauma release exercises. And if you haven't done that, I really recommend looking them up. And one of the things they teach you when you're going through that is, if you look at the wild and you watch wild animals, so if we imagine a gazelle being chased by a lion and it's running and it's running, it's running and it gets away, it wins. And actually a lot of the time they do win over the lions because they have, I don't know, they just do. And if you watch the gazelle afterwards, or whatever animal it is, they will shake their whole body out. So they've been in the fight or flight, they've felt that trauma, and then they shake it all out and they release it. Now, originally, if you went back to like caveman humans, they would have done the same thing. It would have been a perfectly normal, natural thing to do. But over the years, we've developed social structures and we don't have the same threats that we used to have. So let's suppose your trigger towards fight or flight is a stressful email or a stressful telephone conversation. It would not fit socially to stand up and start having a good old shake in the middle of the office after reading a stressful email. So we've evolved to not do that. So we tend to hold that in. But you may notice when you get very, very stressed and very high up in the cortisol and fight or flight response, you will actually start to shake naturally anyway. And it is a natural response. If you see children often when they're really traumatized by something and they're coming down, they will actually naturally shake. And what happens is, as adults, we hold that child close to us and we say, there, don't worry. And we actually stop the shaking. So in some ways we help them to hold on to the trauma by trying to soothe their pain rather than allowing them to just release it naturally, which is a whole other story for another day, and one that I'm not getting into. So anyway, trauma release exercises basically train your body to shake to release the old trauma without having to kind of talk about it or re-experience it. Now, having done a lot of this TRE, I've discovered that you need to work, if you have a lot of trauma in your body, you need to work very slowly and very gradually, because what happens is if you try and do too much at once, you actually can release a lot of trauma from the body, and you can actually flood your brain and your emotions with that trauma. and then you can actually start to relive it and re-traumatize yourself. So with everything, it's about being very cautious and very careful and releasing what's in the body gradually, thinking of it like a tap. So let's suppose we've got lots of trauma stored in our body, and if we turn the tap on full blast, we're going to fill ourselves with trauma. Whereas if we start to shake it and release the bits from the body, and we just do a few little drips and then we turn the tap off, we can easily shake that out and release it and discharge it. So sometimes if we have a lot of trauma stored in the body, we need to gradually, very, very gradually build up to releasing trauma and allowing it to come out slowly and gradually and comfortably. And that will allow us to release what we're holding. And sometimes when we get to the point where we feel like we've released quite a lot, then we can get into a habit of doing daily physical exercises like shaking or yoga or anything that taps into the body, that releases stuff in the body, to have a daily release of trauma so that we're releasing it. And I would say I've done TRE and I've done yoga and I've done actually them combined. And I find TRE very intense for trauma release if you've experienced a lot of intense trauma. I found yoga less intense and more gentle on my body. So more gentle exercises can work. And a perfect example, when I first started doing yoga, and even when I first started teaching, because it took me a long time to work through this, was in my inner hips, my inner thighs were very, very tight. So sitting in butterfly pose with my legs out like that, but feet together, knees out, was pretty much impossible for me. It hurt so much. I remember doing my teacher training because I did it intensively in Spain. We were doing it every day, and my teacher kept putting us into butterfly pose every day, day after day after day, and really like trying to get me deeply into it. And I was in so much pain by the end of the 2 weeks. I just was like, I could barely walk. But after years of practicing with it, I opened a lot, and I did release emotions. I had emotional releases on the yoga mat. Because a lot of my emotional stress and trauma and grief was held in my inner thighs. And you will notice in other areas in your body, you may have specific areas where you will hold tightness, you will hold on to that grief and that trauma and that emotion, and you can gradually release it. So it's about understanding that your body is telling you all the time what's going on. So if you notice an area that feels specifically tight or difficult, that maybe it's holding on to something, and you might not even know what it's holding on to, but it's holding on to something that it feels it needs to hold on to. And it's kind of our responsibility to acknowledge that, be aware of it, and allow it to release. And also, as we're working through these things, if we do things like yoga, we do things like TRE, and we keep doing them, we keep working on our bodies. When thoughts bubble up, because what will happen is when we're working on the body, we will then start to release things that will bubble up as thoughts in the mind. And then whenever that happens, we need to come back into our bodies, and we need to regulate through our bodies, and not just through our understanding. So we can regulate, we can release, we can tune into. So when things come up, what I often like to do is associate what emotion is coming up for me in that feeling, so in that memory. So what emotion am I releasing? What do I feel like? And then I will come back to my polyvagal ladder and think, well, where does this emotion put me on the polyvagal ladder, and what's happening, and what can I do to regulate my body to kind of allow that emotion to dissipate and move through? And it's all about constantly working through those layers, and we will discover layer after layer after layer. I think it's probably one of the toughest things for me, because I think I've done so much healing. I've cleared so much trauma. And then the more comes up, and I'm aware of more, and I'm aware of more, and I'm aware of more. And it's this constant battle of clearing the trauma, clearing the trauma, clearing the trauma, clearing the trauma, that can almost become overwhelming, because we think all this stuff that keeps coming up. But then sometimes you have to turn around and look back and think, wow, look at all the stuff I've actually cleared. And so if you're in that state, you have no sign to notice physical sensations in the body, maybe trauma stored in the body, and you think, I thought I worked through that, just to acknowledge that actually it's okay. And it may come back again in a different way. And as we live through a different era of our lives, and we re-experience new events, and that will happen through our lives. And it's actually, the more we learn to process trauma, the easier it is to process things and move on and allow ourselves that space. So everything that you do to help yourself process is progress towards being where you want to be. And then also, another thing I would always say is we are like it's coming into that bit where we're kind of happy with who we are and where we are right now, and knowing that to sort of like, to coin a phrase from yoga, it's the journey, not the destination. So rather than focusing on where you want to be and the person you want to be, focus on enjoying being who you are and enjoying the process of healing the trauma, of releasing stuff, because that's going to allow it to flow through more easily as well. So that's my bit on trauma. So if you've been trying to think your way out of this trauma and you've read all the books and you've done all the therapy and it still feels like you're sitting on it, then it's your sign to come back to your body and to try something different. So just to remember that. And if this video has resonated with you, remember to give it a like and subscribe for more nervous system work, somatic work, and all sorts of other bits coming up for me. And if you're ready to actually do the work in community, come and join us inside the Sacred Reset on School. It's where we practice these tools together and we don't just talk about them. The link is in the description, and I'll hopefully see you again soon.